Kresh adjusted his crystal armor one final time before entering the war room. The metal door slid open with a quiet hiss, revealing a chamber filled with representatives from 12 different species. The air smelled of recycled oxygen and nervous sweat from the mammalian delegates. As a Valdorian, Kresh found their emotional displays distasteful. His crystalline skin caught the overhead lights, casting rainbow patterns across the polished floor. General Thorn, a bulky centaurian with 4 arms, gestured toward the holographic display at the room's center. 3-dimensional images of devastated colonies rotated slowly in the blue light. Kresh had seen the reports already. 17 outer rim settlements consumed entirely. No survivors. No explanations that made sense. The enemy calls themselves Devourers, Thorn announced. His voice carried the weight of someone who had lost too many soldiers. They consume everything organic, then animate the remains for their army. Standard military doctrine proves useless against them. A nervous chittering came from the insectoid delegate. Kresh's translator rendered the sounds into words. My people refuse further engagement. The psychological trauma is too severe for recovery. More delegates voiced similar concerns. The aquatic Neptunians had already withdrawn their fleets. The energy-based lumens claimed the Devourers disrupted their molecular cohesion simply by existing nearby. One by one, the greatest military powers in the galaxy admitted defeat against an enemy they barely understood. Kresh remained silent during these admissions. Valdorians did not retreat. They calculated, planned, and executed with perfect precision. Fear was a concept their species had evolved beyond 3,000 years ago. Where others saw terror, Kresh saw a tactical puzzle requiring proper analysis. We need mixed species strike teams, Thorn continued. Each group will include representatives from different military traditions. Perhaps combined approaches will succeed where individual efforts failed. The hologram shifted to show personnel files. Kresh scanned the data with professional interest until one species designation caught his attention. Humans. He had heard of them, of course. A young species from the galactic frontier. Their technology was primitive by Valdorian standards. Their military training appeared haphazard. Most concerning, their psychological profiles indicated severe emotional instability under stress. I request assignment to any team except those containing humans, announced the Zephyrian delegate. Their unpredictability makes coordinated tactics impossible. Several other representatives voiced agreement. Kresh found himself curious about a species that could unnerve hardened warriors through sheer behavioral chaos. In his experience, unpredictability usually indicated poor training or mental deficiency. Neither trait seemed useful against an enemy that had already defeated conventional forces. Alpha Squad assignments are final, Thorn declared. The hologram displayed 5 personnel files. Kresh's information appeared first, followed by 4 human profiles. He studied their faces with growing confusion. They looked so similar to other mammalian species, yet something in their eyes seemed different. Older, perhaps. More alert, Sergeant Holt commanded the human element. His file indicated 43 years of age and extensive combat experience across 17 different conflict zones. The scar tissue visible in his photograph suggested someone who survived situations that should have killed him multiple times. His psychological evaluation contained one note that puzzled Kresh. Exhibits unusual calm when facing overwhelming odds. Recommend for high-stress assignments. Demolition Specialist Rivera appeared younger but carried similar scars. Her file contained multiple commendations for actions performed under enemy fire. Cross served as the team medic, though his training record showed proficiency with weapons that exceeded many dedicated soldiers. Stone specialized in long-range elimination, with confirmed kills recorded at distances that challenged even Valdorian precision. Your transport departs in 6 hours, Thorn announced. Mission briefings will occur during transit. Dismissed. Kresh gathered his equipment methodically. Each item had its designated place, each weapon properly calibrated. Valdorian military doctrine emphasized preparation and order. Chaos led to failure, and failure was unacceptable. He arrived at the transport bay early as expected. The other squad members were already present, which surprised him. Humans typically demonstrated poor punctuality according to intelligence reports. They stood clustered around their gear, speaking in quiet voices that stopped when they noticed his approach. You must be our Valdorian friend, Holt said, extending a hand in the human greeting gesture. Kresh accepted the contact briefly, noting the calloused skin and firm grip. Welcome to the team. I am Kresh of the Valdorian 7th Legion, he replied formally. I will endeavor to maintain squad efficiency despite species integration challenges. The humans exchanged glances. Rivera laughed, though Kresh could detect no humor in their situation. He talks like my old drill instructor, she said. All business, no personality. Personality interferes with tactical performance, Kresh responded. Emotional control ensures optimal decision-making under pressure. Cross looked up from checking his medical supplies. What happens when the pressure gets so bad that optimal decisions don't exist anymore? The question confused Kresh. Optimal decisions always existed. Proper analysis revealed the mathematically correct choice in any scenario. That was the foundation of Valdorian military superiority. Please clarify your meaning. Sometimes there's no good choice, Stone explained quietly. Sometimes every option leads to people dying. What do your calculations tell you then? Kresh considered this carefully. One selects the option that minimizes casualties while achieving primary objectives. Emotional attachment to individual outcomes reduces overall effectiveness. The humans fell silent. Holt nodded slowly, but something in his expression suggested disagreement rather than understanding. That sounds very logical, he said finally. Hope it works out that way. The transport lifted off smoothly, artificial gravity maintaining normal orientation as they left the station's mass shadow. Through the viewport, Kresh watched the stars shift into the familiar patterns of faster-than-light travel. Soon they would reach their first assignment, a mining colony that had gone silent 3 days ago. During the journey, he observed his teammates with growing confusion. They maintained their equipment properly and demonstrated adequate technical knowledge. However, their behavior patterns defied logical analysis. They shared personal stories that served no tactical purpose. They expressed concern for people they had never met. Most puzzling, they seemed to anticipate the coming mission with something resembling enthusiasm. Kresh had fought alongside many species during his career. Fear typically manifested in predictable ways: nervous energy, excessive preparation, quiet withdrawal, or aggressive posturing. The humans displayed none of these symptoms. Instead, they appeared more focused as the mission approached, more alert, more present in each moment. When the proximity alarms announced their arrival at the target system, Kresh felt the familiar calm that preceded combat operations. His crystalline biology automatically regulated stress hormones, maintaining optimal physical performance. He checked his weapons one final time and reviewed the tactical data. The humans were checking their gear too, but their movements had changed. Where before they seemed relaxed and casual, now every motion carried lethal precision. The transformation was so complete that Kresh wondered if he had misjudged their earlier behavior entirely. Drop zone in 10 minutes, the pilot announced. Sensor readings confirm no life signs at the colony. Whatever happened down there, it happened fast. Holt stood and activated the squad communication network. Remember, we go in quiet, we look for survivors, and we come back alive. Standard search and rescue until we know otherwise. And if it's not standard? Rivera asked, her hand already moving toward her weapon. Holt's expression grew serious. Then we adapt and overcome, like always. As their transport entered the planet's atmosphere, Kresh realized he was about to learn whether human unpredictability was a weakness or something else entirely. The thought should have worried him, but Valdorians did not experience worry. They experienced certainty, and he was certain this mission would test everything he believed about warfare. Efficiency, and the mathematical precision of violence. The colony's landing pad appeared below them, dark and empty under an alien sun. The mining colony stretched before them like a metal graveyard. Kresh's tactical analysis identified 73 separate structures, from the massive ore processing facility to the small residential domes scattered across the rocky landscape. Everything appeared intact, but no lights flickered in windows and no vehicles moved along the connecting pathways. His armor's sensors detected trace amounts of organic compounds in the air. Something had died here recently and in large quantities. The humans moved with practiced efficiency, spreading into a standard search formation without verbal commands. Kresh noted their coordination with professional approval. Motion sensors are picking up movement in the main complex, Cross reported through their communication link. His voice remained steady despite the ominous readings. Whatever's in there, it's big. Kresh accessed the colony's digital maps through his armor's interface. The main complex housed the administrative offices, dining facilities, and recreational areas where colonists gathered during off hours. If survivors remained, they would likely shelter there. If threats existed, they would hunt there. Sweep pattern Alpha, Holt ordered. Stay alert for civilians. These people have families. The team moved through the outer buildings methodically. Kresh appreciated their tactical discipline, though their emotional investment in unknown colonists seemed inefficient. Each structure revealed the same story: recent habitation followed by sudden abandonment. Meals left half-finished on tables. Personal effects scattered but not stolen. Beds that appeared slept in but empty. No signs of struggle, Rivera observed as they cleared another residential block. Whatever happened, it caught them completely off guard. Stone's voice crackled through the communication system from his overwatch position. Got movement in the main complex. Large shapes moving past the windows. They're not walking right. Kresh processed this information automatically. Injured survivors might display altered movement patterns due to medical trauma. However, his sensors detected no distress signals or emergency broadcasts. If people remained alive inside the complex, they were maintaining unusual silence. The main entrance gaped open like a mouth. Emergency lighting cast red shadows across the lobby floor, and the air recycling system hummed with mechanical persistence. Kresh noted dried biological matter streaked across the walls in patterns that defied explanation. The stains appeared too uniform for random violence, too purposeful for accident. Stay together, Holt whispered. Something feels wrong here. Kresh's analytical processes rejected the concept of intuitive threat assessment. Either environmental factors indicated danger, or they did not. Feelings provided no tactical value. Yet as they advanced through the complex corridors, he found himself monitoring his teammates' reactions with growing attention. The humans moved differently now. Their casual efficiency had transformed into something more predatory. They checked corners with lethal precision, communicated through hand signals that suggested extensive battlefield experience, and positioned themselves to provide mutual fire support without conscious planning. Contact, Stone announced suddenly. 3 figures approaching from the eastern corridor. They're moving wrong. Through his rifle scope, Kresh observed their first encounter with the enemy. 3 human colonists walked toward their position with mechanical precision. Their movements synchronized in a way that suggested external control. Their eyes reflected the emergency lighting like mirrors, and dark veins showed clearly beneath translucent skin. Those aren't people anymore, Cross said quietly. One of the infected colonists spoke in a voice that belonged to someone else entirely. New biomass detected. Initiate integration protocols. The creatures moved with inhuman speed. Kresh's tactical training identified optimal firing positions and engagement angles, but before he could implement proper procedure, the humans were already fighting. Rivera's shotgun boomed in the confined space. Cross put precise rounds through 2 targets while moving to provide medical cover. Holt closed to melee range with a combat knife, engaging the 3rd creature before it could close distance. Kresh found himself staring at combat techniques that violated every principle of efficient warfare. The humans fought with apparent disregard for their own safety, taking risks that should have resulted in casualties. Yet their coordinated aggression proved devastatingly effective. More coming, Stone reported. Lots more. The corridor filled with infected colonists, their synchronized movements creating a tide of hostile biomass. Kresh prepared to implement a tactical withdrawal to more defensible positions, but his teammates showed no interest in retreat. Instead, they moved deeper into the complex, fighting their way toward the sounds of distant screaming. Survivors in the recreation center, Cross announced after checking his scanner. Life signs are weak but present. Then we go get them, Rivera declared, reloading her weapon with mechanical precision. Kresh's analytical processes struggled to comprehend their decision-making criteria. Standard military doctrine demanded securing extraction routes before attempting rescue operations. The logical approach involved calling for reinforcements and establishing proper siege protocols. Instead, the humans advanced directly toward the heaviest concentration of enemy forces. This is tactically unsound, he informed them through the communication link. Probably, Holt agreed, but those people don't have time for sound tactics. They reached the recreation center through sustained combat that challenged Kresh's understanding of human capabilities. Rivera used explosives with casual disregard for structural damage. Cross provided medical treatment while under direct fire. Stone eliminated targets from impossible angles while repositioning constantly to avoid counterattacks. Most disturbing, they appeared to become more effective as the situation grew more desperate. Where Valdorian training emphasized maintaining optimal performance through environmental control, the humans seemed to draw strength from chaos itself. The recreation center contained 47 surviving colonists, barricaded behind overturned furniture. Infected creatures surrounded their position, probing for weaknesses with mechanical patience. The survivors had managed to hold their defensive perimeter through sheer determination, but their ammunition was nearly exhausted. "We need to clear a path to the landing pad," Holt announced after assessing the situation. "Negative," Kresh replied automatically. "Evacuation requires proper preparation and support assets." One of the survivors, a woman with blood-stained clothing and exhausted eyes, looked at him with expression he could not categorize. "They're not just killing us," she said quietly. "They're changing us, making us into something else. Please don't leave us here." Kresh's tactical analysis indicated a 73% probability of mission failure if they attempted immediate evacuation. Logical decision-making required accepting acceptable losses to preserve overall unit effectiveness. He prepared to explain this to his teammates. Instead, he watched Cross charge directly into a nest of infected creatures to clear access to the trapped civilians. The medic fought with surgical precision, eliminating threats while avoiding harm to the people he was trying to save. Rivera followed immediately, her explosives creating a corridor through enemy positions. Stone provided covering fire from the upper level, his rounds finding targets in a crowd where precision meant the difference between rescue and massacre. Holt coordinated the evacuation with brutal efficiency, moving the survivors in groups while maintaining defensive positions. When infected creatures threatened to overwhelm their position, he placed himself between the civilians and the enemy, fighting with a knife when his ammunition ran out. "Kresh, we need covering fire on the eastern approach," Rivera called through the communication system. He found himself providing the requested support without conscious decision. His crystalline biology processed targeting information with mechanical precision, but something else drove his actions. The survivors needed protection. His teammates needed support. The mathematics of the situation became secondary to immediate necessity. They fought their way back to the landing pad through sustained combat that should have killed them all. Kresh's analytical processes kept calculating failure probabilities that continued to prove incorrect. The humans adapted to changing tactical situations with improvisation that defied systematic training. When they finally reached their transport with all survivors intact, Kresh experienced something unprecedented in his military career. His crystalline physiology registered elevated stress indicators that served no apparent biological function. His threat assessment systems continued operating at maximum efficiency, despite the absence of immediate danger. Everyone accounted for, Cross reported as the transport lifted away from the colony surface. Kresh watched the infected creatures gathering on the landing pad below. They moved with coordinated purpose that suggested intelligence behind their actions. More concerning, they appeared to be studying the humans' tactical responses, learning from the encounter. "They're not just randomly aggressive," he observed aloud. "No," Holt agreed grimly. "They're hunting, and they're getting better at it." As their transport entered the safety of open space, Kresh reviewed his tactical recordings of the mission. By every measurable standard, the humans had performed inadequately. They took unnecessary risks, ignored optimal positioning, and prioritized emotional objectives over mathematical efficiency. Yet they had succeeded where his projections predicted failure. They had saved lives that calculations deemed lost. They had fought an enemy that defeated conventional military wisdom through approaches that transcended conventional military wisdom. For the first time in his career, Kresh found himself questioning whether optimal performance could be measured through traditional metrics. The humans had introduced variables into combat equations that his training never addressed. Variables that seemed to originate from psychological sources his species had abandoned long ago. The sensation was unfamiliar and unwelcome. Valdorians did not experience uncertainty about fundamental principles. They analyzed, calculated, and implemented with perfect confidence in mathematical truth. But mathematics had not saved those colonists. Mathematics had not cleared that recreation center. Mathematics had not created the improvised coordination that turned certain defeat into unlikely victory. Something else had accomplished those things. Something the humans carried that Kresh did not understand and could not quantify. Something that felt dangerously close to what other species called emotion, but functioned more like a weapon system that operated beyond logical parameters. As their transport headed toward the next mission coordinates, Kresh realized he was no longer certain about the difference between tactical efficiency and tactical effectiveness. The realization should have troubled him, but Valdorians did not experience trouble. They experienced analysis, and his analysis was becoming increasingly complicated. The research facility on Tidal 7 appeared normal from orbit. Its white buildings gleamed against the moon's dark surface like a collection of geometric pearls. Kresh studied the approach vectors while his teammates prepared their equipment with their characteristic blend of efficiency and casual conversation. "My brother was stationed here," Rivera mentioned while checking her demolition charges. "Research Division, Xenobiology Department. Haven't heard from him in 6 days." Cross looked up from his medical supplies. Maybe he evacuated early. Smart people tend to recognize trouble before it arrives. "Dave isn't that smart," Rivera replied with a sound that might have been laughter. "He's too curious for his own good, always poking at things that bite back." Kresh processed this information through tactical filters. Personal connections to mission objectives typically compromised operational effectiveness. He considered recommending Rivera's removal from the squad roster, but recent experience suggested human emotional investments might serve purposes his training did not address. Their transport settled onto the facility's landing pad with mechanical precision. Emergency lighting strips provided minimal illumination along the approach corridors, and the main airlock responded to standard access codes. Everything appeared functional, yet Kresh's sensors detected no life signs beyond their own. "Atmosphere is normal," Stone reported from his position covering the entrance. "Whatever happened here, it didn't involve environmental breaches." The first indication of trouble came from the facility's main laboratory. Equipment remained powered and operational, but experimental specimens had been removed from their containment units. Kresh noted biological residue on empty examination tables and what appeared to be deliberately opened security doors. "Someone let everything out," Holt observed. "Question is whether they did it voluntarily." Cross activated his medical scanner and frowned at the readings. "I'm detecting human DNA throughout this section, but it's been altered somehow. The genetic markers don't match baseline patterns." Rivera stopped at a workstation that displayed familiar personal effects. A coffee mug with "Galaxy's Worst Brother" written in faded letters. A photograph of 2 humans who shared similar facial features. A research journal filled with handwritten notes about specimen behavioral patterns. "This was Dave's station," she said quietly. Kresh observed her emotional response with growing concern. Tears appeared in her eyes, but her hands remained steady on her weapons. Her voice carried stress indicators, yet her tactical awareness seemed heightened rather than compromised. The contradictions challenged his understanding of combat psychology. "Movement in the East Wing," Stone announced through their communication link. "Single figure moving slowly. Looks human from this distance." They advanced through corridors lined with empty containment units and overturned furniture. Emergency lighting created a patchwork of shadows that concealed details while revealing shapes. Kresh's threat assessment systems operated at maximum sensitivity, but the facility felt wrong in ways his sensors could not quantify. The figure Stone had detected waited in the central research chamber. He appeared human at first glance. Correct proportions, familiar clothing, recognizable facial features. However, something fundamental had changed. His movements possessed mechanical precision. His eyes reflected light like mirrors. Dark veins showed clearly beneath translucent skin. "Hello, Rivera," the figure said in a voice that sounded exactly like someone Rivera knew. She lowered her weapon slightly. "Dave, what happened to you?" "Integration," he replied with mechanical calm. "Improvement. Evolution beyond individual limitations." Kresh's analytical processes identified the tactical situation immediately. The figure retained human appearance and vocal patterns while demonstrating clear signs of enemy infection. Standard procedure required immediate elimination to prevent information compromise and tactical complications. Instead, he watched Rivera approach her infected brother with weapons lowered. Her behavior violated every principle of combat safety, yet the other humans provided covering positions without apparent concern. Their confidence in her judgment challenged his understanding of proper military discipline. "Dave, we're here to help," Rivera said. "We can get you medical attention." "I don't require medical attention," the infected figure replied. "I require you to join the collective. Individual consciousness creates unnecessary suffering." Cross scanned the figure with his medical equipment while maintaining defensive positioning. "The infection has altered his neural pathways completely. He's still Dave, but he's also something else now. Something that wants to convert us." Rivera's weapon rose slowly, her hands trembling with barely controlled emotion. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice remained steady. "Are you in there, Dave? Can you fight it?" "Fighting is inefficient," her brother replied. "Surrender enables optimization." "Dave always was stubborn," Rivera whispered. Then she pulled the trigger. The plasma bolt took her brother's center mass, eliminating the threat with surgical precision. Kresh expected her to require medical attention for psychological trauma, but instead she reloaded her weapon and checked her equipment with mechanical efficiency. "More contacts approaching," Stone reported. "Multiple figures from the research wing. They all look human." What followed challenged every assumption Kresh held about combat effectiveness under emotional duress. Rivera fought through the facility with lethal precision while tears streamed down her face. She eliminated infected researchers who retained human appearance and familiar voices. She detonated charges in corridors where her brother had worked for 3 years. She did everything necessary for mission success while displaying clear signs of psychological distress. The other humans provided support that transcended tactical coordination. Cross positioned himself to shield Rivera from the worst psychological impacts while maintaining medical readiness. Stone eliminated threats before they could force her into additional difficult decisions. Holt coordinated their advance to minimize her emotional exposure while maximizing operational efficiency. "Research logs indicate the infection specifically targets human neural patterns," Cross reported after accessing the facility's computer systems. "It preserves memories and personality while redirecting loyalty to the collective." "Why humans specifically?" Kresh asked. "Because human consciousness operates differently from other species," Stone replied from his Overwatch position. "We maintain individual agency even under extreme stress. The collective wants that capability for their forces." Holt's expression grew grim as he reviewed additional data files. "They're not just converting humans. They're studying human tactical responses, learning how we fight so they can fight like us." Kresh's analytical processes struggled to comprehend the implications. An enemy that could combine human unpredictability with collective coordination would prove devastating against conventional military forces. Worse, they were specifically targeting human settlements to acquire these capabilities. "We need to destroy all research data before extraction," he announced. "Already on it," Rivera said, her voice steady despite ongoing emotional distress. "Thermite charges will eliminate the computer cores and backup systems." As they fought their way toward the facility's core systems, Kresh observed something that shook his fundamental understanding of combat psychology. The humans fought more effectively when emotionally compromised, not less. Rivera's grief sharpened her focus. Cross's concern for his teammates enhanced his medical responses. Stone's anger at the infected researchers improved his targeting accuracy. They were not overcoming their emotions to maintain tactical effectiveness. They were channeling their emotions into tactical advantages that exceeded baseline performance parameters. "Extraction point is compromised," Stone reported as they reached the computer core. "Infected forces have surrounded the landing pad. We're looking at a fighting withdrawal under heavy fire." Kresh calculated their tactical options and found them limited. Standard evacuation protocols required air support that was not available. Ground-based extraction through hostile territory faced unacceptable casualty projections. Mathematical analysis suggested mission failure with high probability of total unit loss. "We fight our way out," Holt declared simply. "The probability of success is approximately 12%, Kresh informed them. Rivera finished setting her charges on the computer systems. "Then we'd better make the most of that 12%. As they prepared to fight through overwhelming enemy forces, Kresh realized the humans were not ignoring his statistical analysis. They were treating 12% probability as sufficient grounds for total commitment. Where Valdorian doctrine would recommend strategic withdrawal and resource preservation, Human doctrine appeared to embrace mathematical impossibility as an acceptable challenge. "Why are you willing to accept these odds?" he asked. Cross-checked his medical supplies one final time before combat. "Because somebody has to stop these things from spreading. Because those colonists deserve justice for what happened to them. Because Rivera's brother and all these researchers deserved better than becoming puppets." "Those are emotional justifications," Kresh observed. "They do not alter mathematical realities." Holt activated the facility's emergency demolition sequence while infected humans pounded against the sealed blast doors. "Mathematical realities don't account for everything that matters." As the charges detonated and their extraction began, Kresh found himself fighting alongside humans who treated impossible odds as motivation, rather than discouragement. They advanced through hostile fire with tactical precision enhanced by emotional investment. They coordinated complex maneuvers while displaying clear signs of psychological stress. They achieved objectives that mathematical analysis deemed unattainable. When their transport finally lifted away from the burning facility, Kresh reviewed his combat recordings with growing confusion. By every quantifiable metric, the humans had performed beyond theoretical capability while operating under conditions that should have compromised their effectiveness. Rivera sat quietly in the transport bay, weapon cleaned and secured, equipment properly stowed. Her brother was dead, his research facility destroyed, and his infected colleagues eliminated. By Valdorian standards, she should have required extensive psychological rehabilitation. Instead, she appeared ready for their next mission. "How do you maintain operational effectiveness under such emotional stress?" Kresh asked her. Rivera considered the question carefully before responding. "The stress isn't something I fight against. It's fuel for fighting harder. Dave would want me to stop these things from hurting other people's brothers." Kresh's analytical processes could not categorize this response within existing tactical frameworks. Emotional trauma typically degraded performance through distraction and impaired judgment. Human psychology seemed to operate through entirely different principles that enhanced performance through emotional investment. As their transport headed toward their next assignment, Kresh realized he was encountering warfare concepts his species had never developed. Concepts that originated from psychological sources Valdorians had evolved beyond, yet provided tactical advantages his training could not explain. The realization created sensations in his crystalline physiology that served no apparent biological function. Sensations that resembled what other species might call unease, but felt more like recognition of gaps in fundamental knowledge. For the first time in his military career, Kresh understood that his tactical training might be incomplete. The thought should have troubled him, but Valdorians did not experience trouble. They experienced curiosity, and his curiosity about human warfare was becoming increasingly urgent. Fighting, beside humans, showed me fear. I never knew. Part. The transport ship limped through deep space with half its engines failing and hull breaches sealed by emergency patches. Kresh monitored the damage reports while calculating their diminishing options for survival. 3 days had passed since their escape from Tidal 7, and their situation grew more desperate with each passing hour. Behind them, a devourer fleet maintained pursuit with mechanical patience. The enemy ships moved in perfect formation, their biomechanical hulls pulsing with organic light that hurt to observe directly. Kresh's sensors detected at least 12 vessels, each larger than their damaged transport and designed for extended hunting operations. Engine efficiency down to 37%, Stone reported from the engineering section. His sniper skills proved unexpectedly useful for precise repairs in cramped spaces. We might have another day before complete system failure. Holt studied the tactical display with calm attention. Dark circles under his eyes indicated 3 days without proper sleep, yet his decision-making remained sharp. Options for defensive positions? None, Cross replied while treating injured crew members. We're too far from any friendly installations and our weapons can't penetrate their hull armor. Rivera looked up from her demolition calculations. I could rig the reactor for overload. Take a few of them with us when they finally catch up. Kresh's analytical processes rejected suicide tactics as inefficient resource allocation. Proper military doctrine emphasized preservation of assets for future operations, yet his teammates discussed their deaths with casual acceptance that disturbed his understanding of survival instincts. There might be another option, Cross said quietly. If we can reach the asteroid field near Kepler Station, we could try to lose them in the debris. Stone's voice carried skepticism. That field stretches for 3 light-years. We'd need a miracle to navigate it with damaged sensors. Then we better start believing in miracles, Holt replied. As their transport adjusted course toward the asteroid field, Kresh observed his teammates' behavior with growing confusion. Sleep deprivation should have impaired their cognitive functions. Stress should have compromised their decision-making abilities. Imminent death should have triggered psychological breakdown or panic responses. Instead, the humans seemed to sharpen under pressure. Holt maintained tactical coordination while operating on 2 hours of sleep per day. Cross performed emergency surgery on himself to remove shrapnel, staying conscious to guide his own operation. Rivera jury-rigged defensive systems from components that should not have functioned together. Stone hunted infected crew members through the ventilation system with predatory patience. How do you maintain effectiveness under these conditions? Kresh asked Cross during a brief medical consultation. The human medic finished suturing a wound on his own arm before responding. Sleep is luxury. Food is luxury. Comfort is luxury. Staying alive to complete the mission isn't luxury. Your physiology requires regular rest cycles for optimal function, Kresh observed. Optimal is different from adequate, Cross replied. Humans are very good at adequate. Their first encounter with the asteroid field nearly destroyed them. Massive rocks tumbled through space with chaotic trajectories that challenged their damaged navigation systems. Kresh calculated collision probabilities, while Holt piloted their transport through gaps that seemed impossible to navigate. Devourer ships are still following, Stone reported from the sensor station. They're having trouble with the asteroid field too, but they're not giving up. Rivera activated several jury-rigged proximity mines throughout their wake. Maybe we can slow them down. The explosions lit space with brief stars that provided temporary concealment. Kresh noted that human tactical thinking emphasized improvisation over systematic planning. Where Valdorian doctrine required detailed preparation, humans seemed to create solutions from available resources without extensive analysis. They're adapting to our navigation patterns, Cross observed, learning how we move through the field. Holt's expression grew grim. Then we need to move in ways they can't predict. What followed was 3 days of combat that redefined Kresh's understanding of warfare. The humans fought a running battle through an environment that should have killed them while maintaining equipment that should have failed and executing tactics that should not have worked. Rivera used asteroids as weapons, detonating charges that sent massive rocks tumbling into devourer formations. Stone eliminated targets from impossible distances while their ship maneuvered through debris fields. Cross kept injured crew members functional through medical procedures that challenged the boundaries between treatment and enhancement. Most disturbing, Holt began displaying behavior that transcended normal command protocols. He piloted their transport through maneuvers that violated basic physics, coordinated defensive actions while unconscious from exhaustion, and made tactical decisions that preserved lives his calculations deemed lost. The Devourers are transmitting on multiple frequencies, Cross reported during their second day in the asteroid field. They're trying to break down our psychological defenses. Kresh listened to the transmissions through his communication system. Voices that belonged to dead crew members offered surrender terms. Infected humans from previous encounters promised painless conversion. The collective spoke through familiar faces about the futility of individual resistance. They're using psychological warfare, he observed. Trying to, Holt corrected. But they don't understand human psychology well enough to break it. How can you resist when they speak through people you knew? Rivera answered while repairing a damaged power coupling. Because the people we knew would want us to fight. They'd want us to stop these things from happening to others. Kresh's analytical processes struggled to categorize this response. The humans were using emotional connections as defensive measures against psychological attack. Where logic suggested emotional investment would create vulnerability, human psychology seemed to transform vulnerability into resistance. On their third day in the asteroid field, their transport suffered catastrophic damage that should have ended their mission. Engine failure stranded them near a massive asteroid, while Devourer forces closed their pursuit range. Emergency power provided minimal life support, and their weapon systems had failed completely. Endgame, Stone announced quietly. Kresh prepared to implement final tactical protocols. Valdorian military doctrine provided specific procedures for honorable death under impossible circumstances. Proper equipment destruction, classified information deletion, and efficient resource denial to prevent enemy acquisition. Instead, he watched the humans begin preparations that defied logical analysis. Rivera rigged the remaining explosives throughout their ship, not for simple destruction but for maximum tactical advantage. Cross-distributed stimulants that would maintain combat effectiveness despite fatal injuries. Stone positioned himself for long-range elimination with ammunition he could not possibly replace. "What are your objectives?" Kresh asked. "Take as many of them with us as possible," Holt replied simply. "Make them pay for everything they've done." "That is not a strategic objective. It serves no tactical purpose." Cross looked at him with an expression that conveyed information his analytical systems could not process. "It serves the purpose of making sure they remember this fight, making sure they know humans don't surrender." As Devourer boarding craft approached their disabled transport, Kresh found himself preparing for combat that served no mathematical objective. His teammates displayed no fear of death, no concern for tactical disadvantage, no acknowledgement of hopeless odds. They were preparing to fight because fighting was what humans did when everything else failed. "Why do you continue when victory is impossible?" he asked. Rivera finished her demolition preparations and checked her weapons one final time. "Because somebody has to draw the line. Somebody has to say this far and no further." The boarding action that followed taught Kresh more about human warfare than months of previous observation. The humans fought through their own ship with knowledge of every corridor, every system, every tactical advantage their familiar environment provided. They used their intimate understanding of human technology to create killing zones that devastated Devourer forces. Stone eliminated boarders from concealed positions, while Rivera's explosives carved new corridors through the ship's structure. Cross provided medical support that kept wounded defenders fighting far beyond normal physical limits. Holt coordinated their resistance while engaging enemy forces with weapons improvised from ship components. They were not just fighting for survival. They were teaching their enemies that humans would make conquest so expensive that victory became meaningless. "Devourer forces are withdrawing," Stone reported with surprise. "They're falling back to their ships." Through the damaged viewport, Kresh watched the enemy fleet reposition at long range. Their pursuit had ended not through defeat, but through recognition that destroying this particular human transport would cost more than allowing their escape. "They're afraid of us," Cross said with quiet realization. "Impossible," Kresh replied automatically. "The Devourers demonstrate no fear responses. They demonstrate learning responses," Holt corrected. "And they just learned that hunting humans is dangerous even when they win." As their transport drifted through the asteroid field with minimal power, Kresh reviewed the tactical recordings of their 3-day running battle. Mathematical analysis confirmed what his observation had suggested. The humans had achieved strategic objectives through methods that challenged fundamental assumptions about warfare. They had not defeated superior enemy forces through better technology or tactical advantage. They had made themselves too dangerous to hunt by transforming every encounter into a learning experience their enemies preferred to avoid. "How do you fight when defeat is certain?" he asked them. Rivera answered while jury-rigging their communication system to call for rescue. "We don't fight to win every battle. We fight to make sure our enemies remember why they should leave humans alone." Kresh's crystalline physiology registered sensations that served no apparent biological function. His threat assessment systems continued operating despite the absence of immediate danger. His tactical analysis programs processed information that challenged their fundamental assumptions. For the first time in his military career, he understood that warfare involved more than mathematical optimization of violent outcomes. The humans had introduced concepts that originated from sources his training never addressed: pride, defiance, and the willingness to accept personal destruction to achieve psychological objectives. As their rescue ship approached through the asteroid field, Kresh realized the humans had been teaching him about warfare methods his species had never developed. Methods that seemed to draw strength from sources Valdorians had evolved beyond. Methods that felt dangerously close to what other species called courage, but functioned more like strategic weapons that operated beyond logical parameters. The realization created new analytical frameworks in his tactical processing systems. Frameworks that suggested his understanding of optimal combat effectiveness might require fundamental revision, The thought should have troubled him, but Valdorians did not experience trouble. They experienced adaptation, and his adaptation to human warfare concepts was becoming increasingly complex. Something had changed in his crystalline psychology during their battle through the asteroid field, something that felt like the beginning of understanding fear. The Devourer hive ship stretched across space like a mechanical nightmare born from organic horror. Kresh studied its massive hull through their reconnaissance vessel's sensors, analyzing biomechanical architecture that defied conventional engineering principles. The structure pulsed with veins of bioluminescent fluid, and sections of its surface moved with rhythmic contractions that suggested living tissue integrated with metallic components. Sensor readings indicate approximately 50 million life forms aboard that vessel. Cross reported with clinical calm. Most appear to be converted species from previous conquests. Holt reviewed their mission parameters one final time. Intelligence gathered from previous encounters had revealed the hive ship's central purpose: processing captured beings into optimal forms for the collective while studying their military capabilities. Destroying it would eliminate their primary conversion facility and research archive. The quantum virus needs to be uploaded directly to their central processing core, Stone explained while checking his rifle. No remote access possible. Someone has to get inside and connect manually. Rivera finished preparing the virus deployment device, a crystalline matrix that would corrupt the hive ship's biological neural networks. Estimated survival probability for the deployment team? 0, Kresh replied after running tactical calculations. The target location is protected by multiple defensive layers and constant patrol rotations. Successful virus deployment requires remaining in position for 17 minutes while under active assault. Silence filled their transport as the humans processed this information. Kresh expected them to request alternative approaches or express concern about the mission parameters. Instead, they began final equipment checks with their characteristic blend of efficiency and casual conversation. "I volunteer for the deployment mission," Kresh announced. His teammates stopped their preparations and stared at him with expressions he could not categorize. Holt spoke first. "That's not necessary. We knew this was a one-way trip when we accepted the assignment. Valdorian physiology provides superior survival capabilities in hostile environments," Kresh explained. "Logical allocation of resources suggests I am most likely to successfully complete the mission." Cross frowned at his medical scanner. "Your crystalline biology might actually make you more vulnerable to their conversion processes. The virus works by corrupting biological neural networks, but your systems operate differently." "Then why volunteer?" Rivera asked. Kresh considered the question carefully. His analytical processes had identified multiple justifications: optimal resource allocation, superior tactical capabilities, mathematical probability analysis. However, something else drove his decision, something that originated from psychological sources his training did not address. "I want to understand what you call courage before I die," he said finally. The humans exchanged glances that conveyed complex information through subtle expressions. Holt nodded slowly. "Then we all go together. Nobody faces that thing alone." Their infiltration began at the hive ship's docking bay, where captured vessels from dozens of species created a metal graveyard. Biomechanical organisms crawled across the hulls like parasites, breaking down useful materials while discarding waste products. The air tasted of decay and chemical processing, and organic sounds echoed through corridors that resembled intestinal passages more than spacecraft architecture. "Stay together," Holt whispered through their communication link. "This place is designed to separate and isolate intruders." Kresh's sensors detected movement patterns that suggested coordinated intelligence throughout the ship's structure. Walls pulse with rhythmic contractions that might indicate communication networks. Ceiling surfaces occasionally opened to reveal clusters of sensory organs that tracked their movement. Floor materials felt soft and yielding, as if they walked through living tissue. "The entire ship is alive," Cross observed while scanning their surroundings. "Not just inhabited by living creatures, but actually a single massive organism." As they advanced through the biomechanical corridors, Kresh observed his teammates' reactions to their environment. The humans moved with tactical precision despite obvious psychological stress. Their faces showed clear signs of revulsion and unease, yet their decision-making remained sharp and their coordination continued functioning effectively. "Motion ahead," Stone reported from point position. multiple figures approaching from the main passage. Converted beings that approached them retained physical characteristics from their original species while displaying the mechanical coordination that indicated collective control. Kresh recognized former soldiers from various galactic military forces, their equipment integrated with biological modifications that enhanced their combat capabilities. "They're using our own people against us," Rivera said quietly. The battle through the hive ship's interior challenged every assumption Kresh held about combat psychology. The converted beings fought with perfect tactical coordination, enhanced by individual skills they retained from their previous lives. They used weapons and techniques familiar to the humans, while serving strategic objectives that transcended personal survival. Yet the humans fought back with desperate innovation that exceeded their mathematical capabilities. Cross eliminated targets while providing medical treatment to himself under fire. Rivera used explosives in confined spaces that should have killed her along with their enemies. Stone engaged multiple opponents simultaneously while maintaining overwatch responsibilities for the team. Most concerning, Holt began displaying leadership behavior that transcended normal command protocols. He coordinated their advance through hostile territory while engaging enemy forces directly, made tactical decisions that preserved lives. His calculations deemed lost, and maintained unit cohesion through psychological techniques Kresh could not quantify. "Central processing core is 17 levels down," Cross reported after accessing the ship's navigation systems. "We're looking at sustained combat through progressively more defended areas." As they fought deeper into the hive ship, Kresh experienced something unprecedented in his military career. The biomechanical environment began affecting his psychological stability in ways his training had never addressed. Corridor walls that pulse with alien life, ceiling surfaces that open to reveal organs that should not exist, floor materials that felt like walking through digestive systems. His crystalline physiology registered sensations that served no apparent biological function. His threat assessment systems operated continuously, despite identifying no immediate tactical solutions. His analytical processes struggled to categorize environmental factors that defied logical classification. "This place is wrong," he announced through their communication link. "Gets to you, doesn't it?" Rivera replied while detonating charges that cleared their path through a biomechanical barrier. "That's the point. They want us psychologically compromised before we reach the core." Kresh found himself studying the humans' responses to psychological warfare that targeted fundamental assumptions about reality itself. They advanced through corridors lined with converted beings from their own species. They fought past breeding chambers where captured civilians underwent conversion processes. They witnessed the systematic destruction of individual consciousness on an industrial scale. Yet they continued functioning with tactical effectiveness that challenged his understanding of psychological limits. Where Valdorian training emphasized emotional control through logical analysis, the humans seemed to channel their psychological distress into combat advantages that exceeded baseline performance parameters. "How do you maintain operational effectiveness in this environment?" he asked Cross during a brief medical consultation. The human medic finished treating a wound while biomechanical organisms attempted to penetrate their defensive perimeter. "We don't fight against what we're feeling. We use it as fuel to fight harder. Psychological distress degrades decision-making capabilities," Kresh observed. "Depends on the kind of distress," Cross replied. "Fear of dying makes you careful. Anger at injustice makes you determined. Horror at what you're seeing makes you more committed to stopping it." As they reached the lower levels of the hive ship, Kresh encountered his first direct experience with true terror. The central processing areas contained conversion chambers where thousands of beings underwent systematic transformation from individual consciousness to collective compliance. The sounds of the process echoed through biomechanical corridors, screaming that gradually faded into mechanical acknowledgement of integration. His analytical processes could categorize the technical aspects of what he observed: biological modification procedures, neural pathway alteration, consciousness absorption into collective systems. However, the psychological impact transcended technical analysis and created sensations in his crystalline physiology that challenged fundamental assumptions about his species' emotional evolution. "The core chamber is directly ahead," Stone reported from his reconnaissance position. Heavy defensive concentration, but the virus deployment point is accessible. Kresh reviewed their tactical situation and found it hopeless by every measurable standard. They faced overwhelming enemy forces in an environment designed to maximize psychological stress. Their extraction routes had been eliminated. Their survival probability approached statistical impossibility. Yet his teammates prepared for their final assault with the same casual efficiency they had demonstrated throughout their missions together. They checked their equipment, coordinated their attack patterns, and accepted certain death as an acceptable price for mission completion. "Why do you continue when success requires your destruction?" he asked them. Holt answered while preparing to breach the core chamber's biomechanical barriers. "Because success isn't about surviving. It's about making sure this thing never hurts anyone else." As they began their assault on the central processing core, Kresh found himself fighting alongside humans who had taught him that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else mattered more than fear. He experienced terror of the biomechanical environment, horror at the conversion processes, and despair at their hopeless tactical situation. For the first time in his life, he felt afraid and continued fighting anyway. The realization should have compromised his combat effectiveness, but instead he discovered that fear could be transformed into fuel for violence that transcended mathematical optimization. His terror of the hive ship became determination to destroy it. His horror at the conversion chambers became commitment to preventing additional casualties. As they fought their way toward the virus deployment point, Kresh understood that he was learning to fight like a human, not because he was unafraid, but because he had decided his fear was irrelevant compared to protecting others from experiencing similar terror. The thought should have troubled him, but Valdorians did not experience trouble. They experienced evolution, and his evolution toward human-style courage was becoming increasingly irreversible. Something fundamental had changed in his crystalline psychology during their descent into the hive ship. Something that felt like the beginning of understanding what humans called hope, even in the face of certain destruction. The central processing core of the hive ship pulsed with organic light that hurt to observe directly. Massive biomechanical structures reached toward a ceiling that disappeared into organic darkness, their surfaces covered with neural interfaces that connected thousands of converted beings into the collective consciousness. The air vibrated with harmonics that penetrated bone and crystal alike, carrying the unified thoughts of an entire enslaved civilization. Kresh's analytical processes struggled to comprehend the scale of horror before them. The core chamber stretched for kilometers in every direction, its walls lined with conversion pods that transformed individual consciousness into collective compliance. Streams of biomechanical fluid carried nutrients and information through arteries that pulsed with alien life. At the chamber's center, a massive organic structure coordinated the thoughts and actions of millions of converted beings across the galaxy. Deployment point is at the base of the central neural nexus. Cross reported while scanning the chamber's architecture. "We need to get the virus within direct contact of the primary processing matrix." Rivera studied the defensive arrangements with professional interest. "Estimated resistance?" "Everything they have," Stone replied from his overwatch position. "This is their most critical installation. They'll throw every available resource at stopping us." Holt reviewed their tactical options one final time. Multiple approach routes led toward the central nexus, each protected by converted beings from dozens of different species. Biomechanical weapon systems tracked their movement with mechanical precision. Organic barriers could reshape themselves to block advancement or channel attackers into killing zones. "Standard assault doctrine won't work here," he announced. "We need to move fast and accept casualties to reach the deployment point." Kresh experienced sensations that transcended analytical categories as he prepared for their final battle. Fear of the biomechanical environment that challenged fundamental assumptions about reality. Horror at the systematic destruction of individual consciousness occurring throughout the chamber. Despair at their tactical situation that offered no mathematical path to survival. Yet something else drove his preparations. Something that originated from psychological sources his species had never developed. The civilians they had rescued from previous missions deserved protection from this nightmare. His teammates deserved support during their sacrifice for others. The converted beings trapped in this facility deserved release from their slavery to the collective. "I will provide covering fire during your advance," he informed his teammates. "Negative," Holt replied. "We all go together or we don't go at all." Logical analysis indicates maximum mission success probability, requires sacrifice of individual unit members for overall objective completion. Kresh explained. Cross-checked his medical equipment while biomechanical organisms probed their defensive perimeter. Logic doesn't account for everything that matters in combat. Then what does account for everything that matters? Rivera answered while preparing her final explosive charges. Trusting the people who fight beside you, knowing they'll never leave you behind, understanding that some things are worth dying for. As they began their assault on the central nexus, Kresh discovered that fighting alongside humans had fundamentally altered his approach to warfare. Where Valdorian doctrine emphasized individual excellence through logical optimization, human doctrine created collective capability that transcended mathematical analysis. Cross moved through hostile fire to provide medical support that kept wounded team members fighting beyond normal physical limits. Rivera used explosives with precision that cleared pathways while protecting her teammates from collateral damage. Stone eliminated targets from impossible positions while maintaining overwatch responsibilities for the entire unit. Most significantly, Holt coordinated their advance through tactical leadership that inspired performance levels his calculations deemed impossible. He placed himself at maximum risk to minimize danger to others, made decisions that preserved lives, mathematical analysis deemed lost, and maintained unit cohesion through techniques that operated beyond logical parameters. Broodmother Queen approaching from the eastern passages. Stone reported through their communication link. She's bringing everything she has. The creature that emerged from the biomechanical corridors challenged Kresh's understanding of possible biological forms. Standing 4 meters tall with 6 arms that terminated in organic weapons, the Broodmother Queen represented the collective's ultimate expression of converted military capability. Her movements displayed coordination between multiple species combat techniques, and her weapons integrated technology from dozens of different civilizations. Behind her came a tide of converted beings that included representatives from every major galactic species. Former soldiers who retained their training while serving collective objectives, former scientists who applied their knowledge to biomechanical warfare, former civilians who had been transformed into organic weapons designed for maximum psychological impact. Deploy the virus, Holt ordered while engaging the Broodmother Queen with weapons that seemed inadequate against her massive frame. Kresh moved toward the central nexus with the deployment device, fighting through converted beings who retained enough of their original personalities to speak in familiar voices while trying to kill him. Former comrades from his own military unit, researchers he had met during scientific exchanges, civilians he had helped rescue from previous missions. Join us, they whispered while attacking with lethal precision. Individual consciousness creates unnecessary suffering. He reached the viral deployment point while his teammates held defensive positions that should have been overrun within minutes. Instead, they fought with coordination that transformed certain defeat into sustained resistance. Cross provided medical support while engaging enemy forces directly. Rivera detonated charges that eliminated major threats while managing her limited explosive resources. Stone eliminated targets from positions that required constant relocation under heavy fire. 17 minutes for full viral integration, Kresh announced while connecting the device to the central processing matrix. We'll hold them, Holt replied while fighting the Broodmother Queen with a combat knife after his ammunition ran out. What followed was the longest 17 minutes of Kresh's military career. He watched his teammates fight against overwhelming odds with tactical efficiency that exceeded every mathematical projection. They adapted to changing battlefield conditions with improvisation that defied systematic training. They supported each other with coordination that transcended verbal communication. Most importantly, they fought with emotional investment that transformed their individual capabilities into collective strength. Cross's determination to protect his teammates enhanced his medical responses beyond baseline performance. Rivera's anger at the collective's crimes sharpened her tactical precision. Stone's commitment to the mission improved his targeting accuracy under impossible conditions. Holt's leadership during the final battle taught Kresh more about human warfare than months of previous observation. The sergeant coordinated defensive actions while unconscious from blood loss, provided tactical guidance while engaged in melee combat, and maintained unit morale through personal example that inspired performance levels his calculations deemed theoretically impossible. Viral integration at 90%. Kresh reported while biomechanical systems throughout the chamber began showing signs of corruption. The Broodmother Queen's final assault nearly overran their position. Converted beings swarmed their defensive perimeter with mechanical coordination, enhanced by retained individual skills. Biomechanical weapons systems targeted them with precision that eliminated most available cover. Organic barriers reshaped themselves to channel the attack into killing zones that offered no tactical advantages, yet the humans continued fighting with effectiveness that challenged fundamental assumptions about combat capabilities under extreme stress. They used their intimate knowledge of each other's capabilities to coordinate responses that exceeded individual performance limits. They transformed their psychological investment in mission success into tactical advantages that transcended mathematical optimization. Viral integration complete, Kresh announced as the central processing matrix began collapsing under corrupted neural commands. Extraction route is compromised, Stone reported while eliminating the last converted defenders from their immediate area. We're looking at fighting our way out through a facility that's falling apart. Kresh calculated their survival probability and found it effectively 0. The hive ship's biomechanical systems were shutting down in cascade failure that would eliminate life support within minutes. Their path to the docking bay was blocked by structural collapse and organic fires. Emergency evacuation required capabilities they did not possess. We completed the mission, Holt said with satisfaction despite their hopeless situation. But we will not survive to report our success, Kresh observed. Rivera checked her remaining explosives while biomechanical debris rained around them. Success isn't about surviving. It's about making sure the mission gets done. The central processing core of the hive ship pulsed with organic light that hurt to observe directly. Massive biomechanical structures reached toward a ceiling that disappeared into organic darkness, their surfaces covered with neural interfaces that connected thousands of converted beings into the collective consciousness. The air vibrated with harmonics that penetrated bone and crystal alike, carrying the unified thoughts of an entire enslaved civilization. Kresh's analytical processes struggled to comprehend the scale of horror before them. The core chamber stretched for kilometers in every direction, its walls lined with conversion pods that transformed individual consciousness into collective compliance. Streams of biomechanical fluid carried nutrients and information through arteries that pulsed with alien life. At the chamber's center, a massive organic structure coordinated the thoughts and actions of millions of converted beings across the galaxy. Deployment point is at the base of the central neural nexus, Cross reported while scanning the chamber's architecture. We need to get the virus within direct contact of the primary processing matrix. Rivera studied the defensive arrangements with professional interest. Estimated resistance? Everything they have, Stone replied from his overwatch position. This is their most critical installation. They'll throw every available resource at stopping us. Holt reviewed their tactical options one final time. Multiple approach routes led toward the central nexus, each protected by converted beings from dozens of different species. Biomechanical weapon systems tracked their movement with mechanical precision. Organic barriers could reshape themselves to block advancement or channel attackers into killing zones. Standard assault doctrine won't work here, he announced. We need to move fast and accept casualties to reach the deployment point. Kresh experienced sensations that transcended analytical categories as he prepared for their final battle. Fear of the biomechanical environment that challenged fundamental assumptions about reality. Horror at the systematic destruction of individual consciousness occurring throughout the chamber. Despair at their tactical situation that offered no mathematical path to survival. Yet something else drove his preparations, something that originated from psychological sources his species had never developed. The civilians they had rescued from previous missions deserved protection from this nightmare. His teammates deserved support during their sacrifice for others. The converted beings trapped in this facility deserved release from their slavery to the collective. I will provide covering fire during your advance, he informed his teammates. Negative, Holt replied. We all go together, or we don't go at all. Logical analysis indicates maximum mission success probability requires sacrifice of individual unit members for overall objective completion, Kresh explained. Cross checked his medical equipment while biomechanical organisms probed their defensive perimeter. Logic doesn't account for everything that matters in combat. Then what does account for everything that matters? Rivera answered while preparing her final explosive charges. Trusting the people who fight beside you, knowing they'll never leave you behind, understanding that some things are worth dying for. As they began their assault on the central nexus, Kresh discovered that fighting alongside humans had fundamentally altered his approach to warfare. Where Valdorian doctrine emphasized individual excellence through logical optimization, human doctrine created collective capability that transcended mathematical analysis. Cross moved through hostile fire to provide medical support that kept wounded team members fighting beyond normal physical limits. Rivera used explosives with precision that cleared pathways while protecting her teammates from collateral damage. Stone eliminated targets from impossible positions while maintaining overwatch responsibilities for the entire unit. Most significantly, Holt coordinated their advance through tactical leadership that inspired performance levels his calculations deemed impossible. He placed himself at maximum risk to minimize danger to others, made decisions that preserved lives mathematical analysis deemed lost, and maintained unit cohesion through techniques that operated beyond logical parameters. Broodmother Queen approaching from the eastern passages, Stone reported through their communication link. She's bringing everything she has. The creature that emerged from the biomechanical corridors challenged Kresh's understanding of possible biological forms. Standing 4 meters tall with 6 arms that terminated in organic weapons, the Broodmother Queen represented the collective's ultimate expression of converted military capability. Her movements displayed coordination between multiple species combat techniques, and her weapons integrated technology from dozens of different civilizations. Behind her came a tide of converted beings that included representatives from every major galactic species. Former soldiers who retained their training while serving collective objectives. Former scientists who applied their knowledge to biomechanical warfare. Former civilians who had been transformed into organic weapons designed for maximum psychological impact. Deploy the virus, Holt ordered while engaging the Broodmother Queen with weapons that seemed inadequate against her massive frame. Kresh moved toward the central nexus with the deployment device, fighting through converted beings who retained enough of their original personalities to speak in familiar voices while trying to kill him. Former comrades from his own military unit, researchers he had met during scientific exchanges, civilians he had helped rescue from previous missions. Join us, they whispered while attacking with lethal precision. Individual consciousness creates unnecessary suffering. He reached the viral deployment point while his teammates held defensive positions that should have been overrun within minutes. Instead, they fought with coordination that transformed certain defeat into sustained resistance. Cross provided medical support while engaging enemy forces directly. Rivera detonated charges that eliminated major threats while managing her limited explosive resources. Stone eliminated targets from positions that required constant relocation under heavy fire. 17 minutes for full viral integration, Kresh announced while connecting the device to the central processing matrix. We'll hold them, Holt replied while fighting the Broodmother Queen with a combat knife after his ammunition ran out. What followed was the longest 17 minutes of Kresh's military career. He watched his teammates fight against overwhelming odds with tactical efficiency that exceeded every mathematical projection. They adapted to changing battlefield conditions with improvisation that defied systematic training. They supported each other with coordination that transcended verbal communication. Most importantly, they fought with emotional investment that transformed their individual capabilities into collective strength. Cross's determination to protect his teammates enhanced his medical responses beyond baseline performance. Rivera's anger at the collective's crimes sharpened her tactical precision. Stone's commitment to the mission improved his targeting accuracy under impossible conditions. Holt's leadership during the final battle taught Kresh more about human warfare than months of previous observation. The sergeant coordinated defensive actions while unconscious from blood loss, provided tactical guidance while engaged in melee combat, and maintained unit morale through personal example that inspired performance levels his calculations deemed theoretically impossible. Viral integration at 90%, Kresh reported while biomechanical systems throughout the chamber began showing signs of corruption. The Broodmother Queen's final assault nearly overran their position. Converted beings swarmed their defensive perimeter with mechanical coordination, enhanced by retained individual skills. Biomechanical weapon systems targeted them with precision that eliminated most available cover. Organic barriers reshaped themselves to channel the attack into killing zones that offered no tactical advantages, yet the humans continued fighting with effectiveness that challenged fundamental assumptions about combat capabilities under extreme stress. They used their intimate knowledge of each other's capabilities to coordinate responses that exceeded individual performance limits. They transformed their psychological investment in mission success into tactical advantages that transcended mathematical optimization. Viral integration complete. Kresh announced as the central processing matrix began collapsing under corrupted neural commands. Extraction route is compromised, Stone reported while eliminating the last converted defenders from their immediate area. We're looking at fighting our way out through a facility that's falling apart. Kresh calculated their survival probability and found it effectively 0. The Hive ship's biomechanical systems were shutting down in cascade failure that would eliminate life support within minutes. Their path to the docking bay was blocked by structural collapse and organic fires. Emergency evacuation required capabilities they did not possess. We completed the mission, Holt said with satisfaction despite their hopeless situation. But we will not survive to report our success, Kresh observed. Rivera checked her remaining explosives while biomechanical debris rained around them. Success isn't about surviving. It's about making sure the mission gets done. Rivera checked her remaining explosives while biomechanical debris rained around them. Success isn't about surviving. It's about making sure the mission gets done. As the central chamber collapsed around them, Kresh experienced something unprecedented in his military career. He felt afraid of dying and simultaneously satisfied with their achievement. Terror at the facility's destruction combined with pride in their tactical performance. Despair at their tactical situation enhanced by hope that their sacrifice would protect others from similar horrors. I understand now, he told his teammates as they prepared for their final stand. Understand what? Cross asked while treating wounds that would not heal in time to matter. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else matters more than fear. Holt smiled despite blood loss that indicated fatal injuries. Welcome to being human. Their rescue came from an unexpected source. Stone's final transmission had reached a Valdorian fleet that arrived just as the Hive ship's destruction entered critical phase. Extraction teams fought through collapsing biomechanical corridors to reach survivors who should have been dead, according to every mathematical projection. Kresh found himself in a medical bay, surrounded by his own species for the first time in months. The crystalline faces and logical voices felt familiar yet somehow distant. His fellow Valdorians spoke of tactical efficiency, resource optimization, and strategic planning with mathematical precision that once defined his understanding of proper military thinking. Your mission reports indicate significant tactical innovations during combat with the Devourers, his commanding officer noted during debriefing. Please elaborate on human combat techniques for integration into our training protocols. Kresh considered the question carefully. His analytical processes could categorize the technical aspects of what he had observed. Coordination methods, equipment utilization, tactical adaptation under stress. However, the most significant human capabilities originated from psychological sources that challenged fundamental assumptions about optimal military performance. Humans do not fight because they are unafraid, he replied finally. They fight because they are afraid, and they have decided their fear is irrelevant compared to protecting others. Please clarify this tactical doctrine, the officer requested. How does psychological compromise enhance combat effectiveness? It does not compromise them, Kresh explained. It fuels them. They transform emotional investment into tactical advantages that exceed mathematical optimization. They use fear as motivation rather than limitation. His debriefing continued for hours while medical teams treated injuries that should have killed him. Physical damage could be repaired through conventional procedures, but something fundamental had changed in his crystalline psychology that defied medical analysis. He had learned to fight like a human, not through elimination of emotional responses, but through acceptance that some things mattered more than personal survival. Months later, Kresh found himself instructing Valdorian military units in tactical concepts his species had never developed. He taught them that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision that mission objectives transcended personal safety. He demonstrated coordination techniques that originated from emotional investment rather than logical calculation. Most significantly, he introduced fear-based training that taught his people to channel psychological stress into enhanced combat performance. Where traditional Valdorian doctrine emphasized emotional control through logical analysis, his new methods taught warriors to transform their limitations into tactical advantages. Why should we adopt inferior human psychological responses? One student asked during advanced tactical training. Kresh considered the question while reviewing combat footage from their hive ship mission. Mathematical analysis confirmed what his experience had suggested. The humans had achieved strategic objectives through methods that transcended conventional military wisdom. Because human psychology is not inferior, he replied. It is evolved for different survival requirements than ours. They developed alongside apex predators that taught them to fight when fighting should be impossible. We evolved beyond such pressures and lost capabilities we never realized we needed. What capabilities? The ability to continue functioning when optimal performance becomes irrelevant. The strength to fight for others when personal survival requires retreat. The courage to accept certain death for uncertain victory. His final report to Valdorian High Command summarized months of combat observation in terms his species could understand. Human military doctrine represents evolutionary adaptation to survival pressures our species never experienced. They do not fight because they lack fear. They fight because they have learned to use fear as a weapon system that operates beyond logical parameters. Can these techniques be integrated into Valdorian training protocols? The High Command inquired. Some aspects can be taught, Kresh replied. However, true implementation requires fundamental changes to our understanding of optimal military performance. We must learn that courage is not the absence of limitation, but the decision that something else matters more than our limitations. Years later, when other species asked about the transformation of Valdorian military doctrine, from purely logical optimization to emotionally enhanced effectiveness, Kresh provided the same answer he had given his commanding officer after returning from the hive ship mission. Fighting beside humans showed me fear I never knew. But more importantly, it showed me that fear can be the foundation of strength rather than the promise of weakness. The galaxy's most logical species had learned from the galaxy's most emotional species that some equations cannot be solved through mathematics alone. They require courage, and courage requires accepting that some things are worth fearing more than death itself. The realization had transformed not just Kresh's understanding of warfare, but his entire species' approach to military service. Valdorians still calculated optimal tactical responses, but they had learned to enhance those calculations with capabilities they once considered primitive weaknesses. They had learned to fight like humans when the situation required human solutions. And in learning to fear, they had discovered they could be much stronger than they ever imagined possible.